Corners and edges are places where precise, detailed finishing really shows. Variations in the designs and patterns in these areas can give a special touch to the entire sewing project. That's why we often like to dress up our bindings and miters to call attention to subtle embellishments. This can be accomplished much more easily than you might think at first. Come into my sewing room and let us share with you just how easy this is. We're going to have a real fun time today. I'm so happy to have as my guest today Nina McVeigh. Nina is an educator trainer for Bernina of America. Nina, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Martha.
Beautiful pillow. Tell us a little bit about this.
Well, this is one where I needle punched the fabric first, and these are silk. So I did silk on silk, a little bit of Angelina fiber to add a little sparkle, and then embroidered on top of it.
Beautiful, and this is so interesting.
And this, again, is an exercise in machine techniques. Machine quilting, embroidered quilting, stitches on fabric, just playing the automatic tapering stitches and a decorative binding.
Just having fun.
Just having fun.
I love the round pillows, Nina.
I do too. This is endless embroidery. So again, just playing with embroidery, a little bit of piecing to keep it interesting, and a wonderful round pillow.
And you know what we have enjoyed so much through the series, this beautiful quilt. And I understand today that you're going to share some ideas on binding. Is that correct?
That's correct.
So we've enjoyed the beautiful quilt, and we're going to absolutely have fun, because you do have to finish a quilt as soon as all the fun is had on it, right?
And these will be all machine done techniques.
We like that too.
It goes even faster.
And now let's go straight to the techniques. I know all of you have loved watching Nina give you the techniques for this gorgeous, gorgeous quilt. And now, Nina, it's time to bind it. I think you have some tricks for us.
I do. Binding is always that last thing, and so many times it's a technique that you start by machine, but you end up doing the last of it by hand. And because a lot of people don't want to do that handwork, I have two machine techniques for you, two different types of binding. The first one is what I would call a decorative binding. On this particular quilt, of course, it's done tone on tone, so it really adds an elegant look. But because I didn't know if the camera would allow you to see that, we are going to do that in a much higher contrast, as you see on this piece. I actually have two different decorative stitches, because we know that our machines now have a lot of stitches to choose from. I'm simply going to start by cutting a traditional binding, 2.5 inches wide, and folding it in half. I like to do this with a straight cut binding rather than a bias. And then when I come over to the machine, I'm just going to use a 1/4 inch foot and put my binding on traditionally, just like you would normally. I'm then going to take my quilted piece, and I'm going to take that binding and flip it over to the back side, and this is where you would normally then do it by hand. But I'm going to choose a decorative stitch to do this with, and depending on the width, you might want to narrow that up a little bit, unless you cut your binding wider. If it's too wide, it goes off the edge of the binding. And so I'm going to put this back into the machine and go ahead and stitch that out. And if you've narrowed that stitch, you want to make sure you put your needle position into a far left position, so that I'm stitching right in the ditch of my seam, but the decorative part of the stitch is going into the binding itself. So not only is it decorative, but it's also holding my binding in place.
Absolutely beautiful. Absolutely beautiful.
And again, that's a really fast, easy, fun, decorative binding. My next binding is, if you didn't want this to be decorative, if you just wanted what looks like a very traditional binding. Again, white on white or tone on tone, can't really see that, but there's also a slight, it looks like a piping on the back side. And this is all done in in the same technique. You're not really making piping. So what you're going to do is take a cotton yarn. It's very soft, so it's not adding a lot of weight to that. And you are going to, with a pin tuck foot, a 3-groove pin tuck foot, simply couch that piece down in the very center of your binding, just using a zigzag stitch. And I've used a contrast thread here so that you can see that. I then fold my binding in half, so it creates a little bit of a ridge in the very center of my binding. Traditionally attach the binding again with that 1/4 inch seam, and then I'm going to take this and I'm going to turn it to the back side. This time I'm just going to be stitching in the ditch so that when it's all done, you can't see it on the front, but on the back side you've almost created a little piping, and that really neatens the back side of this. So I'm just going to put on my number 10 edge stitching foot and turn this to the back. And the trick here is that the guide on my foot, now I'm going back to straight stitching in a center position, the guide on my foot is going to ride in that ditch, and I want to feel that that yarn that's in the center of my binding is just to the left of that foot, or the guide on the foot. And I will, with my fingernail, continue to feel that right in here. So that on the front side, I'm stitching in the ditch, and I have all the confidence in the world that on the back side, it has created this piping. All machine done.
Well, I really love both of those techniques. The one that you can see the decorative stitch, and the one that gives you just that extra a little bit of, what did you say?
Piping.
Well, the piping and makes it a little bit...
A little cleaner finish.
A little cleaner finish, absolutely. Yeah. Nina, thank you so very much. And now I have some antique techniques to share with you. I have the most beautiful petticoat to show you, and then how easy it is to do it. You see, this is a petticoat. Can you imagine putting this work into a petticoat? And it has the 2 rows of insertion, the ruffle. Look at this gorgeous design. I call this a Greek key. We go up and over miter, down miter, and you could do this flip-flopping, but this one's mitering. Miter around. Now notice carefully, in between these 2 shapes, we have beautiful tucks. You know, the Victorians were great for inserting things in between something else. Those are traditional tucks, the folded tucks where you mark the lines, you pinch it up, and you sew a straight line, a straight seam. Now, you also can do a little cheating and get your pre-tucked fabric, and really it isn't pre-tucked, but it looks like it's pre-tucked. Always, always draw a template. So here we have the template drawn for the top Greek key and the bottom Greek key, and the miter lines are always critical because you really do have to get those exactly correct. So we've drawn the template on the skirt, and then we're going to have the fun of shaping the lace. So start at one side. You can do either the top or the bottom first, it doesn't matter. And we're going, this is like you on a diamond, you're going to miter the points. See, we've folded the miter in, and then we have the top and the bottom. Now here comes the trick. We're going to have to cut away. By the way, we're going to zigzag the bottom, the outsides, bottom and top. Now don't zigzag the insides, because we're going to cut away all of this fabric that's in between, because remember, we've got to put it on top of the tucks, okay? Now remember, zigzag the bottom, zigzag the top. Now, after you cut away the whole inside, then you're going to slip the piece of tucked fabric in. And I'm going to have a template there. Go back and place it correctly. You can't just flop it down. You have to place it correctly. I have my strip. Now, see, I've got a big strip of tucks. It isn't cut out into Greek keys. It's just a big piece. Then I'm going to come in. I'm going to sew the inside, zigzag the insides, and I bet you can guess what we're going to do then. After we've zigzagged, I'm going to come back. I'm going to trim away all the excess tucking. And ladies, that is exactly what made that beautiful, beautiful skirt. And now I have a fun segment for you called I Love My Serger. I am so thrilled to have my very dear friend and business colleague, Kathy McMakin, with me today. Kathy is president of Martha Pulling Company. Kathy, show us your serger magic.
I will do that. We love our sergers. Today we have a really quick project for you that is a notions caddy. And the thing that I like best about this caddy is it's made on your serger, but you actually can use it under your sewing machine. And what I mean by that is this. You can see it's just a piece of fabric that we have a little bit of batting in. We've created a pocket across the bottom using a little touch of heirloom sewing, and then we use the sewing machine to sew in the pockets. And then you can fill it with all your wonderful sewing notions that you need for a class, we will say. And then when you get ready to go to your class, you can fold this like this. Fold it into thirds like this, and then you wrap your ribbon around it and you tie this into a bow, and it holds all your notions very nicely into your notions caddy. Now, once you get to your class, then you can take this. You can take your notions caddy like this, and you can slide this end of your notions caddy underneath your sewing machine, and the pocket hangs right in front of you with all your tools ready to use. So let's see how easy it is to make this wonderful little thing. First of all, we have to make the pocket. So in order to make the pocket, what we need to do is we're going to take a piece of fabric and we're going to serge it using a rolled hem. So I want you to look at this little tiny hem right here. This is a 3-thread rolled hem, and so you'll be using your right needle with your settings set on rolled hem, just like your book tells you for your particular serger. And we're going to use that for our heirloom technique. So we're going to serge these two pieces of fabric together. One is an eyelet and one is just a plain piece of fabric. We serge those together. This is with the black thread, which you wouldn't use. And so we wanted to show you how this kind of disappears when you sew it with white thread. Once you get that sewn, then that creates a nice size pocket for all of your notions. You're going to place a lining piece behind that pocket strip, and we're going to treat the lining and your pocket strip as one layer. Then you lay a piece of edging lace along the top edge over both of those layers of fabric. And the thing that I want you to see here is, do you see how the straight edge of the lace is not even with the edges of the fabrics? The edge of the lace you pull down away from the edge of the fabric so that you'll have enough fabric caught in that serger seam so that you have a nice secure seam. Now when we place this underneath our serger foot, we want to catch the straight edge of that lace in that seam. So you can see that you're going to cut off all the excess fabric with your serger, and I'm sure you can see how neat the little seam is. So what we did on this little sample is we just serged part of the way, and then so that you could see what was being cut away and what was being serged in place. Now, actually that creates the pocket, because all you do is you press your lace away from the two pieces, and then you have a nice little pocket that has been created. Now, once your pocket is created, then you are going to layer it on top of your caddy. Your caddy, if you'll notice, consists of a smaller piece of fabric and batting, with the backing being much larger. So if you'll look at the edges of your piece, your inner piece, is much smaller than your outer piece, and that's going to create what we call a wrapped binding. So in order to serge all that in place, we place our pocket on top of our inner piece, our smaller piece, and then to serge, we take the lining and we place it over right sides together to the pocket and the inner piece, and then we're going to show you what that's going to look like. Now, if I peek in here, I'm going to turn it around so that you can see. Do you see how if I peek in here, you're going to be able to see your pocket in here? So do you see the little pocket that's right inside there? What you're going to do, you're going to take the excess fabric that you had earlier, and you're going to push everything to one side and even up the edge, and you're going to serge that. Then you even up the other side, and then you serge that. And what that does is it creates a bubble in this lining fabric. Once you get that bubble created by serging each side, then you're going to pull the excess fabric to each side over those seams. So can you see the little fabric pleat that is created? Once you get your pleat in place, then you're going to come to your serger and you're going to serge along the lower edge, keeping that pleat in your fabric. And we're just going to serge very quickly across the bottom. Okay. And we'll look at this side. And do you see how you do still have this little pleat still in the fabric? Now, let's go back to our board and we're going to look to see what happens when we turn that. When we turn our caddy to the right side, do you see how the binding just flips over the edge? Perfect. It is a great wrapped binding. And then all we have to do is turn the top down once, and we turn the top down once again, and we top stitch in place with our sewing machine, put our pockets in with a straight stitch, and there you have it.
Oh, Kathy, that is such a beautiful project and so easy.
So quick.
We love that. And now I have some designer techniques to share with you. I'm so pleased to have as my guest today my dear friend and business colleague, Kathy Barnard. Kathy is editor of So Beautiful magazine. Kathy, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Martha. I'm glad to be here. We have something fun to share today.
And beautiful.
Yes. This is actually a double scallop placket, part of the Beyond the Basic Bodice series that I'm teaching and will be in upcoming issues, where you can take a basic bodice and push it a little further and get more designs out of it and not have to buy a pattern every time you want to do something different. So I'm going to show you how to do this scallop placket here, and then this insert is embellished with ribbon down the center. But think of it, Martha, if you do the center with maybe smocking, or you can do a beautiful piece of fabric there with a pretty print, but I like to play around with the ribbons. So let me go to the boards and show you how easy this is to do, and you don't need a pattern at all. So let's start with where we're going to end up. So we have a goal to reach. I wanted to show you this up close. We've done it in a different fabric here to give you an idea of just how different this can look in a print. But we're not going to cut out a pattern. We're going to make a scallop piece of fabric for both sides. We're going to set our ribbon on our insert, put our insert behind, stitch this together, then we're going to cut it out. So let's go there. I'm going to save this for later. So the first thing I want to do is I have my basic bodice pattern, and I've drawn off here half of the width of the ribbon, so I have a guide to go by. And we're going to cut pieces of fabric. We're going to be folding this back, so we want a piece of fabric that we know will be a generous amount that we can cut out later. And I've made it generously longer because once I get my scallops in, I may want to shift it around up and down a little to find the most favorable position. So I will show you how we do that. Next, what we're going to do is focus on our scallops. And I just made a template from a file folder. And I made my scallops about a 1/2 inch deep and maybe 1.5 inches wide. But you can make any shape you want. You can make small scallops, or larger scallops. It's up to you. You can use any household round jar lid or a glass to help create your curves. And once you've done this, you're going to trace along the fold. You're going to put the top of that scallop right along that fold. You'll trace it, shift it, trace it again, and you'll want to use a blue wash away marking pen. So the next thing you want to do is to stitch this out with a 1.5 stitch length, and that's very important to get precision because it really gives you these nice tight corners and a nice clean curve. And as you see here, I haven't cut this out. This is what it's going to look like right after you stitch it. Then you want to cut into each of these little places, and then you're going to notch very tightly to get a nice clean curve. And I love this point turner. It's easy when you're flipping this to the right side. It's hard to flip that with just your finger, but if you have a point turner that you can use like this using the curved edge, that pushes that out and gives you a nice clean edge to iron on top. And this is what your finished piece will look like. So you want to do 2 of these. Now what I've done here is I've already pinned. I have a wide piece of fabric, generously wide, with my ribbon stitched down the middle, and I've already lined up this side about 1/4 of an inch from the ribbon. And I've decided that I've got my pattern here doubled, and I've decided that I like these 2 big pink flowers here to be kind of centered on my bodice. Or, you know, if you wanted to, you could choose the 2 green flowers, but that gives you shifting room. Then I'm going to line this up exactly the same way, and it's very, very important that you align these points across from each other perfectly. And then once you do this, you will flip this over and flip this edge over and cut this out. You'll cut along this edge, and then you'll stitch these together. I did mine with a serger. Right here I've shown where we were cutting this edge off to equal that. And then we finished it with a serger, and I laid this on top and cut it out. And this is where we finished. We have a finished bodice, and I'll show you the back side. Here's my serger edge. You can also just do a straight stitch and an overcast, and then you add your little buttons. What you want to do though is you want to add the buttons after you've done your full construction, but you can add a collar, or you can finish this off with a bias binding. But there's lots of wonderful, cute things you can do for that filler.
I think that is so creative,
Yeah, that's
and
easy.
it just adds that extra touch to it. And also, you have a pattern that you can use many, many ways and many, many times.
Yeah, you can even run those horizontal if you wanted to, or run it along the bottom of a skirt.
Pretty,
Yeah.
wouldn't it? Kathy, thank you so much.
You're welcome.
And now I would like to share a piece from my vintage collection with you. This is one of my favorite little dresses in my collection. I wish I could tell you right now where I got it, but actually I can't. Probably either in Massachusetts or London. I absolutely love the way the lace is just gathered around the neckline. And look at the mitered pieces. These are the square miters, and with the lace and then the beautiful Swiss trim. Oh my, I love to talk about tucks. And this is a little piece of tucks with some Swiss trim and gathered lace on the shoulders. Look, it's almost another piece, almost a little bit like a bib with the tucks and the Swiss and then the gathered lace. The little long sleeves have beautiful details, the Swiss and then the gathered lace. Now, as we come down this little skirt, I want you to see that there's some little holes in it. And some people say, now, Martha, should we try to repair those little holes? Well, I don't. I mean, I bought them with the little holes, and I'm not going to worry about repairing those little holes. Look at the bottom of this skirt. Is that sweet or what? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 teeny tiny folded tucks. Now, if you have a pin tuck machine today, you can do the same thing with a double needle, but these ladies didn't have pin tuck, double needles and pin tuck feet. Now look at this beautiful Swiss, the French, the Swiss, the French, the Swiss, and then the beautiful little lace gathered on the bottom. By the way, these little Swiss trims here have entredot on either side of the Swiss trims, or you could put the entredot on the bottom yourself. We'll quickly turn it around so you can just see a little bit of the back. It's really just as beautiful on the back as it is on the front. And I think the little buttons are gone on this. Probably it had little buttons and little buttonholes or little loops. Sometimes those are gone. Actually, that dress is about 125 years old. Thank you so much for joining me in my sewing room today. I hope you've had fun, and I'd like to invite you to come back next time.